Hello, High Five Live, VIP for free friends. I've missed you. It's been a minute since I've gotten on here, and I've missed the opportunity to be with you, to interact with you. So please, once you jump on, make sure that you comment where you're from. Let me know how you're doing, how the new year's treating you so far. I know it's been rough for some, but hopefully we can bring a little light here. We've heard you. We've gotten messages and seen comments from many of you who have asked for us to do something related to Come Follow Me. And I know we're getting started a little bit late this year, but I wanted to jump on today and give you just a quick Come Follow Me message. So we're going to do this and try to do it weekly. Maybe if we have time, we'll do it a couple times a week, and maybe we'll get guests on like we did for our virtual church history tour and have them share some thoughts and some insights related to Joseph Smith, his family, and the Doctrine and Covenants. What a beautiful thing that we get to study that. And I'm already reminiscing about our virtual church history tour and all the incredible things that we got to see and experience together, even though it was virtually. What an experience, what a blessing that was to my life. It was something that I needed in 2020, and we've just appreciated all of our VIP friends who have commented and encouraged us and who have asked for more. And so excited to jump on. We'll try to keep these pretty brief, but you know me. I when I say brief, then I go on and I like to talk and share thoughts. And so if it ever gets too long, just let me know in the comments. Hey, that's enough. Like, Kori, you can be quiet now. No. But I'm excited to share some thoughts today related to what we're studying this week, but actually kind of jump back and get a little history before the Joseph Smith history, because the journey to Palmyra was for the Smith family was insane. And I know I talked about this during the virtual church history tour, but I want to highlight a couple of maybe other parts that I didn't highlight. And when we did this on the virtual church history tour, we were on the road from where Joseph was born in Vermont to Palmyra, and it was we were driving on the same roads, the same dirt roads that the Smith family used. No, I don't know, but the reception was a little bit spotty, and so we went in and out a little bit, and so you missed parts of that. If you would like to see that, I believe it's called, if you search through the group, or if you want to scroll down to the beginning of our virtual church history tour here on our VIP group, you can find that under Is It Good or Is It Bad? I believe is what that video was called. And it's a fun one, but we'll keep this one brief. And I'm going to talk about the perils, specifically the trials. Not that the Smith family just had a horrible life, and I don't think that's the case. But like many of us, most of us, maybe all of us, they experienced a lot of heartache and sorrow during those first, especially during these first few years before they reached Palmyra. And so I just want to real quickly go through some of those perils that they faced that ultimately led them to being in Palmyra, New York, and then buying a farm just outside of Palmyra and what eventually was called Manchester, in the fields there, the West Fields, and there they built the log cabin. And that's where, in the grove near their home, where Joseph had the first vision. But let's back up to kind of get Joseph Smith history before Joseph Smith history. We got to start with his mom and dad, right? And so let's start specifically with Lucy. In 1794, Lucy had just lost her sister. Her sister, she had spent, since the age of 16, she had been helping out her sister. She'd kind of been her sister's caretaker. And her sister eventually passed away from tuberculosis. And she was distraught by this. In fact, at one point later on, she wrote, "Often in my reflections, I thought that life was not worth possessing." She had actually lost two of her sisters to tuberculosis. And just a trying time for her. Well, during that time, her brother Stephen Mack, shows up, and he sees his sister just absolutely distraught. And at the time, Lucy and her family, they're living in a place called, Gilsum, New Hampshire is where they're at. And in Gilsum, New Hampshire, Stephen comes to visit, and she's just distraught. And Stephen says, "Hey, why don't you come and stay with me for a little while? Let's kind of distract you from all that's going on and all that you're struggling with, and come with me. And so she makes the 75-mile journey to a place called Tunbridge, Vermont. And there in Tunbridge, Vermont is where Lucy meets Joseph. So in part because of that grieving process, she ends up in the place where she meets Joseph Smith, senior. Eventually, he wasn't senior yet. Anyways, so Joseph Smith. She meets Joseph. He's a 25-year-old, tall, over 6 foot, strapping man, and they fall in love and they get married. They get married unchurched is how they would phrase it. Unchurched, and this is really the first generation where that happened. Because remember, Lucy and Joseph, they're born as British citizens, British citizens in the British colonies, and it's during their lifetime that the Revolutionary War occurs in this brand new country. So they and this brand new country are kind of starting off on their journey together, and at first things are looking amazing for the Smith family. Lucy, right off the bat, she receives this incredible gift. It's from her brother Stephen. I love Stephen Mack for a couple of reasons, and this is one of them. He was sitting there. Lucy was going off, right, to get married and all that, and Stephen's sitting there with his business partner, and Stephen turns to his business partner and he's like, well, Lucy's getting married, I guess we should probably give her a gift. And Stephen's business partner kind of turns to him and is like, well, yeah, I guess we oughta. And he says, his business partner says, and whatever you give her, I'll double it, or I'll match it, he says. And so Stephen says, really? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And so Stephen says, $500. Which, would be a great wedding gift today, right? But $500 back then was pretty awesome. And then his business partner says, done. And so they pull out, their checkbooks or the cash or whatever, and they hand Lucy $1,000. Now again, that's a sweet egg to start with, right? For the Smith family, and so they get hooked up on Mack family farm, one of their farms, and they get started in life, and so they got a farm, they got some money, like things are going pretty well. Until later on, about a year after they were married, they have their first son, and you can imagine, or maybe some of you know what it feels like to be a newly married couple and to be anticipating that first child, and what a joyous experience that is. But unfortunately, that first baby doesn't make it, and he was unnamed that we know of, anyways, and he died, and so. Kind of a rough way, and some of you may have experienced similar experiences, but that first baby doesn't make it, and kind of a rough way to start a marriage. But they hold on and hold to each other and keep going. In the next 6 years, they are able to have 2 more children, and they named the first one Alvin and the second one Hiram. And their things are looking up and things are looking good again, but there's some belief that the farm they were working on had a lot of rocks, so stony soil is what they'd call it, and so they weren't sure if that was the right place for them. So they decided to go on an adventure. Joseph Smith Sr. Decides to try his hand in the mercantile business, and so they move away. I believe they actually rent out that farm and they go to just outside in Randolph. They move to Randolph and they start this new adventure in Randolph, Vermont. And during this time, during this move, Lucy actually gets tuberculosis, the same illness that killed actually 2 of her older sisters, Lavisa and Lavinia. Her older sisters both died from this same illness, and so Lucy starts to think, that's it. It killed my sisters. The medical profession at that time, most doctors in the area actually didn't go to medical school, right, at that time, and so there really wasn't much to do. There were no hospitals in New England at the time, and so she thought that this is it. I've got what killed my sisters, and I'm going to die. her mom shows up to kind of help her out through that process, and she's about ready to say goodbye to her husband and her 2 boys and move on. But she doesn't feel ready to die, and so she begins to plead with Heavenly Father. She says, during the night I made a solemn covenant with God that if he would let me live, I would endeavor to serve him according to the best of my abilities. So she makes this covenant. God, if you will let me live, please. She thinks it's over, but she says, if you'll let me live, I promise I'll do the best that I can. I'll serve you, and I'll lead my family and help them to serve you. Well, miraculously, shortly after this, she hears a voice. And the voice says to her, among other things, let your heart be comforted. You believe in God and believe also in me. And this comforts her, and then she eventually recovers from tuberculosis. And she's amazed, and she views it as this miracle. And so she goes and she begins to search for the right church to join so that she can begin that keeping that covenant which she made to serve God. And kind of maybe a cool part of this is she makes it, and the next child that she has at this point, she had already had a daughter too. I think I forgot that before. She already had a daughter, Sophronia, but the next next child that she has is actually Joseph. After she made that covenant to serve God and to find and started her search for the church, the next child she has is Joseph. They name him Joseph Smith Jr. after his father. Well, during that time, so while Lucy's going through that illness, Joseph's going through some struggles as well. Joseph Sr., that is. He started his mercantile business. He's selling on credit, and things are going pretty well, so much to the point where he hears that he decides to invest in Chinese ginseng. Or wild ginseng, actually, and he hears that in China it's becoming popular and you can sell it for lots of money, but in Vermont it just grows wildly. So he collects all this ginseng, and a man comes to him named Mr. Stevens, and he offers him $3,000. Now we already talked about what $1,000 was, but $3,000, right, to buy this Chinese ginseng from him. Now, to give you a little perspective, eventually when the Smiths make it to Palmyra and buy their farm there, their mortgage every month is $100. Every year is $100 a year, and Joseph. So that kind of gives you perspective. That's 30 years owning a farm that he's offered for this Chinese ginseng. But Joseph says, no, I think I can make more if I send it to China on my own, right, rather than working through a middleman. So he goes and finds a ship that'll send it to China. But it just so happens that the case is that this Mr. Stevens, his son, was on that same ship. And all that Joseph, he thinks he's going to get more than $3,000. He thinks he's going to get upwards of $4,500 from this Chinese ginseng that he's sending over to China. But in return, when the ship returns, all they bring him is a chest of tea. And Mr. Stevens' son, when it's kind of found out by one of Joseph's brothers of what happened, the Stevens, they run off to Canada. And so that leaves the Smith family now with $1,800 worth of debt with the mercantile business and all that they have going on. So now they're $1,800 under. Well, they have a farm that's worth $1,500, and they have Lucy's money, right, still from her brother. Well, to sell the farm early, Joseph he sells it low, and he sells it for $800 rather than the $1,500 that they believed it was worth. He sells it for $800, and they take that $1,000, that wedding gift of Lucy's, and they pay off their debts with that. And so now they're penniless, and they'd sold their farm, they're homeless, and so they end up going to they jump around a couple places, but this is when they end up in Sharon, Vermont, which is where Joseph was born. So now, so far, right, and we're not all the way through, but they've experienced illness. They've experienced that almost they thought they were going to die, right? They've experienced betrayal. They've experienced failed dreams, right? Their dreams have been shattered. Again, they could have been with the $1,000 that Lucy had and the $3,000, right? They could have been one of the wealthiest families in New England, but instead, because of some poor decisions and some bad luck and some betrayal, they end up really struggling. And honestly, they never really recover from that, and they struggle financially pretty much the rest of their lives, But there are moments of peace, and there's moments where Lucy, in writing her biography of the story of Joseph Smith, she says, we were happy, which I think is significant. Even though they're going through all these trials and all these unfair things, that they were still happy. Well, a couple moves later, they end up in a place in New Hampshire called West Lebanon. Let me see. Make sure I'm in my right place in my notes. And while in West Lebanon, let me mention one other thing that happened. They had another baby. They named him Ephraim, and this is two children after Joseph, and then Samuel, and then they had another baby named Ephraim, who only lived for 11 days. So maybe one of the first hard things for Joseph as a 4-year-old, seeing a baby brother that only lives 11 days and dies soon after he was born, and I'm sure that would have been rough for their family. Eventually they end up in West Lebanon, and you know this story, and I actually go into pretty deep detail in that other video I mentioned. So if you want to learn more about Joseph's leg and the miracles that I truly believe occurred to save Joseph's leg, that involved the doctor Nathan Smith, who was literally the only doctor in the nation that could have saved Joseph's leg, and maybe even Joseph's life, lived 6 miles away, and he was a professor at Dartmouth University. He actually shouldn't have been there. He should have been starting a medical school at Yale, but because of the circumstances at the time and the typhoid epidemic that was going around, he was there 6 miles away from Joseph and his family, and was able to go and operate on Joseph's leg. Now, think of the worst pain that you've ever experienced, and you might understand some of what Joseph was experiencing when these doctors operated on his leg. And they bored holes into his leg. And again, Joseph doesn't take there's no anesthetic. He doesn't drink any alcohol. He's just there holding his dad. They don't tie him down. And they bore into his leg and actually chip pieces of bone, of infected bone, off of his leg and out of his leg. And the recovery from this experience takes 3 years. He's on crutches. Could you imagine? He's 7 years old. So for 7 to 10 years old, he's a boy on crutches. If you know any 7 and 10-year-olds, right? They're all over. They're energetic, right? 7 and 10-year-old boys. And he's stuck on crutches for those years. So far, specifically thinking of Joseph, Joseph's experienced a little brother who's passed away, poverty in his family, a lot of moves. He's experienced an epidemic where his older sister, Sophronia, almost dies. In fact, at one point, the Smith's sister, Lucy Mack, says that she stops breathing, and that she picks her up and prays. And she's like, she believes she had received confirmation that her daughter would live, and she wasn't going to give up. So she walks the floor and prays, and eventually she starts breathing again. And so this epidemic that almost killed his sister almost caused him to lose his leg, and he experienced incredible pain and suffering from that surgery that those doctors did to ultimately save his leg. And this young boy has already gone through so much. And then they ended up moving back to Vermont. The Smith family does, and they're back they're in a place called Norwich now, and they've bought a farm, and they're starting to farm again. But again, with these medical bills that they have to face, and everything else, right? They're impoverished again. They're poor, and they're trying to get back on their feet. Well, they've experienced epidemics and heartache and betrayal. What have they not experienced? Well, a natural disaster, and that's where we learn about Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which explodes. And it's said that it was heard 1,200 miles away. People heard the explosion that occurred when this volcano, Mount Tambora in Indonesia, erupts. There's lots of estimates on how many people were ultimately killed by the eruption. One that I've seen is around 80,000, 70 to 100,000 people are not only affected but killed, right? And then the whole world is affected. It sends the ash and the dust go up into the atmosphere, and it causes a volcanic winter that lasts I've seen as long as 4 years, right? That this affects the atmosphere and affects the climate around the world. Specifically, an area of the world that was hit the worst was northeastern United States, and specifically right above Vermont and New Hampshire, in that area. And the Smith families experienced that. 1816 was the year that Mount Tambora erupted. It was known as the year without a summer, or 1816, and froze to death. And that's what the Smiths experienced. There's people, there's accounts of people who said it snowed on the 4th of July. Could you imagine? Hey, let's go sledding and then let's set up the fireworks. But that was their time, and that's what Joseph and his family experienced. And because of that, in successive years, 2 years in a row, their crops fail. And at this point, Joseph Sr., who's trying to avoid going into bankruptcy and losing everything with his family, he decides, he hears through the grapevine that there's a couple states that have land for sale, that maybe he can restart somewhere. And it's Ohio and Pennsylvania, and one of those places is New York. And so some of his family had already made their way down that way, and he decides, you know what, I got nothing else. I failed at being mercantile. My mercantile business failed. I failed at investing. I'm struggling with farming. I've had rocky soil. I've had natural disasters. I've had illnesses in my family. I gotta get away. And so this is the big move, right? Most of their moves have been in New England, but now they're gonna go to Western New York, to the Finger Lakes area, and try something new, because what he's been trying isn't working. And so he goes down initially at the end of the summer, in August or September. Joseph Sr. goes down, and then later on writes back to Lucy, who's up in Vermont still with her 8 children, just taking care of things all on her own. He says, come on down. And so they hire a man to help them, a mover, right, to drive the wagon and to help them make their way down, as Lucy treks down with her 8 children from 17 to 7 months. And she makes this incredible journey with her family. On the way, this man that they hired tries to steal their wagon, but Lucy stands up to him as the fireball of faith that she is, and she says, no, you're not taking my wagon. And she gathers a group of people and says, this man's trying to steal my wagon, and they drive him off, and she takes the family the rest of the way on her own. Well, there's one more story, and I think I should maybe share this one before, but it's one of my favorite parts of this journey of the Smith family, and it specifically has to do with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith, it was said that the man that they had hired treated Joseph pretty rudely, right? He's still on crutches at the time and still hobbling around with his leg, and it said that guy would consistently kick him off, and when someone would say something to them, like Hiram or Alvin would try to stand up to this man, he would hit him with the butt of his whip, and so Joseph had a hard journey. Well, towards the end of the journey, he again is trying to get on a wagon and make his way, because he's just in pain, and he's walked hundreds of miles with his family, and this 300-mile journey with his family. And it says this, and this is Joseph who records this. He says, on our way from Utica, the last leg of their journey, he said, I was left to ride on the last sleigh in the company. But when that came up, I was knocked down by the driver. So the driver, again, he says it was one of Gates' sons, so probably one of his uncles or something, knocks him down. And he says, I was left to wallow in my blood until a stranger came along and picked me up and carried me to the town of Palmyra. Now, I think it's kind of symbolic that little Joseph, symbolic of the whole Smith family probably, that little Joseph is carried the last leg of the way to Palmyra, bloody and beaten and broken and tired and poor. Lucy says when they show up, they have 2 pennies left in their pocket. And Joseph's carried by a stranger, an angel maybe, I don't know. But definitely at least an earthly angel who picks him up and carries him, little Joseph, to Palmyra. And then we know, right, what happens there, just outside of Palmyra, and on a little farm in a beautiful grove of trees. But the journey there was not easy. And I think it's similar for us, my friends. I think our journey to revelation, our journey to peace, our journey to joy, real joy, is sometimes perilous, like the road to Palmyra was. But I do know it is possible that as we have faith and we continue to seek and we never give up, that we too can find peace, can find joy, and ultimately can find heavenly healing, as Joseph did in that sacred grove. I bear my witness that Joseph Smith, as a 14-year-old boy, with that leg probably still limping a little bit, walked into that grove, knelt down on that leg, and said a sweet prayer of a boy, asking Heavenly Father for forgiveness and guidance and peace on the earth. And the trial and the darkness was probably culminated in that moment as he was attacked by the adversary. And all the trials and all the difficulties that he'd gone through maybe were brought back to his mind in that moment. But he continued to pray, and ultimately he saw God. The light came, and it penetrated that darkness, and it chased it away, and just as it does. And I know that Joseph was able to find answers to his questions and peace. And he says in one of his accounts that he was filled with love and joy for many days. And I know that we can be filled with that similar love and joy and peace as we go through hard times and difficulties. We know what it's like a little bit to go through natural disasters, some of us, right? We know what it's like to go through epidemics or pandemics. But we too can find peace as we seek the Lord, like Joseph did. And that is my testimony, that is my witness. And I share that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks, friends, for joining me. I see a bunch of friends here commenting. Hi, Stevie and Emily and Barbara. Oh, we love you guys. Thank you for jumping on here. Jennifer, Diane. I hope that was helpful. I know I talked too much. I know I told you I was going to keep it short, and then I went on and told a bunch of stories. But I love church history. I love the prophet Joseph Smith. And so I'm excited to jump on here maybe a couple times a week or once a week or something and share some thoughts. Again, if you think it's helpful, invite your friends to come and join our VIP for free group. If you know people that are looking for a little insight or context or would like to hear some stories from church history, we're going to be sharing them all year here. Some people have asked about our church history tours. We are still hoping to go. We're still planning and moving forward with faith that things will work out. We do not know. We've been in contact with our friends at church headquarters about church history sites and pageants and things like that, and we just don't know. We don't have answers on those yet, but we are still moving forward. Our family trip is almost full, so if that's something you're interested in, we only have a few spots left there, and we do have a good amount of spots still left on our senior trip, where we're going to take a group of youth that either graduate in 2021 or 2022. We're going to take them out too and have an EFY-like experience, but at the sites, and that'll be a lot of fun. And then we're also going to do a virtual tour as well, to take you along with us this year and talk about some of the things we've been learning about in these places. And so hope you'll follow along here on VIP for free. Follow along on highfivelivetours.com. And then obviously hope you'll continue to enjoy our messages on High Five Live, our Facebook page, where we share daily messages to uplift and bring a little light to the world. We love you, friends. Thanks for all your goodness. Thank you for all your incredible comments. I'm glad that you hadn't heard some of those, and I was able to share some of them. I love these stories, and I love the insight that we gain from these stories that help us understand the scriptures and help them come alive for us. And so anyways, I'm excited. I love you, and we'll talk to you again next time. Thanks, friends.